I mean that societies go out of balance periodically in different directions. I mean it more in terms of the interplay of three sectors of society, not two, not just public-private. That's been the problem, public-private, but public-private and what I call plural, or civil society. And you can see societies going out of balance in all directions. So communism was imbalanced in favor of the public sector. America today is imbalanced in favor of the private sector, and Venezuela or Hungary or Russia are maybe not Russia, but the populist countries are imbalanced in favor of the plural sector. In other words, there are community groups that are seizing control to the exclusion of other groups, but they're community groups because we've got a new form of imbalance that's more global. You know, Nazism before World War II was not global. It was isolated in 3 or 4 very aggressive countries like Italy and Germany and Russia, some others. But now what we're seeing is a complete swing in the entire world except for places like Russia and China to complete imbalance in favor of the private sector. And the reason there's so much resistance to globalization now is because globalization is considered an uncontrolled corporate force, a private sector force that has no constraints on it. There's no global government. The United Nations is completely weak, and each country gets picked off by global corporations that play them off against each other. Within countries, depending on the country, but almost everywhere where there's so-called democracy, in the United States, government is beholden completely to private forces like the National Rifle Association or the banks or whoever. So government can't do it. So the plural sector, civil society, has to drive government and drive business, drive government to respond and business to be responsible. If you look at social movements and you look at social change, revolutions, you know, the Tea Party in Boston, the original Tea Party in Boston was a community movement. The storming of the Bastille in France was a community movement. The civil rights changes in the United States were community movements. So they start in communities, they start in civil society or the plural sector. And that drives, and then you get a cooperation. You know, here in Denmark, as I read the climate change efforts, it started with some people on the ground, a mechanic apparently, who they started to build some windmills. I mean, that's where it started. And then the government pitched in. Corporations are building the windmills now and so on. So it's a cooperation across the three sectors, but it tends to start on the ground. I mean, the most obvious thing that businesses do, and you've got many of them, is contribute to, you know, alleviating issues like global warming, for example. So you've got all kinds of companies building windmills in this country and so on. Business can also, what I call corporate social responsibility 2.0. 1.0 for me is addressing the conditions of a problem, and 2.0 is addressing the cause. So a new way to recycle waste would be 1.0, and reducing waste seriously is 2.0. And businesses could be doing a lot more than that. What businesses should not be doing is pushing their weight around in government. I say to any chief executive who wants to be responsible, get out of my government, get out of our government. It's your government, it's my government, but it's not your company's government. And if companies want to be responsible, they've got to stop the lobbying. And of course, who's going to do that unless they're forced to? I think, first of all, the stock markets can be very destructive because they force a short-term, very narrow, profit-oriented motive. And I was delighted to learn yesterday how many companies in Denmark are really controlled by trusts and not controlled by the stock market. That's a key way to go. Before I arrived here, I knew about Novo Nordisk, but I didn't realize how broad it was. Tata in India is controlled by family trusts. So there are ways for companies to push back against the very narrow, destructive force of the traditional stock market. Don't forget, people act as individuals too. You know, you may be a corporate chief executive, but you're also an individual. I argue that you may work in the private sector, you may vote in the public sector, but you live in the plural sector. Everybody lives in the plural sector. We belong to clubs. We donate to charities, we donate our time, we volunteer, we send our kids to the Y or whatever it is. I don't think there's anybody who doesn't interact with 10 plural sector organizations in a week. So there's all kinds of things people can do as individuals as well as under the corporate umbrella. I see it as a leadership task, but I'm not a big fan of leadership. I think we need leadership. I recognize leadership. I'm a fan of communityship. I think we just overemphasize leadership at the expense of communityships. The word leadership implies one person. It's always one person. You say leader, you think of a person. You don't think of a group. You think of a person motivating a group maybe, but that's not egalitarian. Denmark's a country it's an egalitarian country. It's about communityship. It's not about leadership.